The chair wobbled under Elvis's feet, and for a moment, 10-year-old Elvis Aaron Presley thought he might fall right off the stage at the Mississippi-Alabama Fair and Dairy Show. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold onto the microphone stand, which towered above him even standing on the chair. 300 people stared up at him, farmers, their wives, kids from school who'd never noticed him before, all waiting for the shy boy from East Tupelo to either sing or run. Behind him in the wings, Gladys Presley was praying harder than she'd ever prayed, except maybe when Jessie Garron died at birth. "Please, Lord," she whispered, "don't let my baby forget the words. Don't let them laugh at him." But here's what nobody in that crowd knew. 15 minutes earlier, Elvis had been throwing up behind the grandstand, begging his mama not to make him go through with it. Look, this is where the real story begins. October 3rd, 1945. The Mississippi-Alabama Fair and Dairy Show was the biggest event in Lee County. For a boy from the wrong side of Tupelo, the poor side, the side where indoor plumbing was a luxury, the fair was like visiting another planet. The smell of cotton candy mixed with cow manure, the screams from the tilt-a-whirl, the lights that turned the October night into something magical. Elvis had been coming to the fair since he could walk, but always as a spectator, face pressed against fence rails, watching other kids win prizes he couldn't afford to try for. This year was different. This year Gladys had entered him in the Children's Day talent contest. "But Mama, I don't have a talent," Elvis had protested when she'd signed him up 2 weeks earlier. "You can sing, baby. You sing all the time." "That's different. That's just singing." But Gladys had already paid the 25-cent entry fee, money that should have gone toward groceries, and written his name on the list. Elvis Presley, age 10, East Tupelo. Song Old Shep. Remember this detail. It matters. Elvis had learned Old Shep from the radio, listening to Red Foley on the Grand Ole Opry. It was a song about a boy and his dog, about loyalty and loss, about loving something and having to let it go. Elvis didn't have a dog. The Presleys could barely feed themselves, let alone a pet. But something about that song made him cry every time he heard it. Maybe because it was about losing something you loved. And Elvis, even at 10, understood loss. His twin brother Jesse, dead before he could breathe. The house they'd lost when Vernon went to prison. The grandmother who died the previous winter. The morning of October 3rd started with disaster. Elvis woke up with no voice. Not hoarse, completely gone. The fear had literally stolen his ability to speak. Gladys made him gargle warm salt water, fed him honey straight from the jar, wrapped his throat in a warm cloth that smelled like camphor. By noon, he could whisper. By 2 o'clock, when they started the walk to the fairgrounds, they didn't have money for the car that day. He could manage a croak. "Maybe it's a sign," Elvis whispered. "Maybe I ain't supposed to sing. Maybe it's a test," Gladys countered. "Maybe God wants to see how bad you want it." But Elvis didn't want it. Not really. What he wanted was to make his mama proud, and there was a difference. But wait. Don't skip this part. At the fairgrounds, Elvis saw the other contestants. There was Shirley Galloway, who'd been taking piano lessons since she was 4. James McMahon, whose family owned the music store downtown. Betty Sue Winters, who sang in the church choir and had a voice like an angel. And then there was Elvis, skinny shy, wearing his only good shirt which was too small, and pants that Gladys had let down so many times the hem was more thread than fabric. "I can't do this, Mama." "Yes, you can. They're all better than me." "Maybe. But they're not you." The contest started at 3 p.m. Elvis was number 16 out of 23 contestants. He watched from the side of the stage as one by one, kids performed. Shirley played Claire de Lune without missing a note. James sang "You Are My Sunshine" while playing guitar. A real guitar, not the imaginary one Elvis played on a broom handle at home. Betty Sue sang "Amazing Grace," and 2 women in the front row started crying. Notice what happened when contestant number 15 finished. The announcer, a man named Mississippi Slim who had a radio show in Tupelo, called out, "Next up from East Tupelo, Elvis Presley." Elvis didn't move. "Elvis Presley? Is Elvis here?" Gladys pushed him gently. "Go on, baby." Elvis's legs felt like water. The walk to the stage, maybe 20 feet, felt like crossing the desert. The stairs creaked under his weight. The stage, just wooden planks on a raised platform, seemed to sway. Or maybe that was just Elvis swaying. Mississippi Slim looked at him with a mixture of pity and impatience. "What are you gonna sing for us, son?" Elvis opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The crowd started to murmur. Someone laughed. Not mean, just nervous. Elvis saw his classmate, James Osborne, in the third row, already smirking. This was going to be a disaster. He was going to be the boy who froze at the fair, who couldn't even remember his own name. Then he saw Gladys. She had moved to where he could see her clearly, standing by the side of the stage. She wasn't praying anymore. She was just looking at him, and in her eyes was something Elvis had never seen before. Not just love, but belief. Absolute, unwavering belief that her boy could do this. Remember, Elvis was barefoot. He'd taken his shoes off backstage because they pinched hand-me-downs from a cousin that were a size too small. So there he stood, barefoot on the wooden stage, and suddenly that felt right. This wasn't about being perfect like Shirley, or rich like James, or angelic like Betty Sue. This was about being Elvis, the barefoot boy from East Tupelo who sang to himself while walking to school. "Old Shep," Elvis finally managed to say. "You need the microphone lowered, son." That's when Elvis did something that would become his trademark. He took charge of his performance space. He looked around, saw a wooden chair beside the stage, and without asking permission, dragged it over. The scraping sound echoed across the fairgrounds. He positioned it under the microphone, climbed up, and suddenly he was tall enough, not just for the microphone, but for what he was about to do. The countdown to legend started with a breath. Elvis closed his eyes, not because he was scared anymore, but because he needed to find the song inside him. Old Shep wasn't just words and melody. It was a story, a feeling, a piece of his heart he was about to give to strangers. When he opened his eyes and started to sing, his voice was different from the croak of that morning, different from his speaking voice, different from anything anyone expected. "When I was a lad and Old Shep was a pup." The fairgrounds went quiet. Not the polite quiet of Shirley's piano or the respectful quiet of Betty Sue's hymn, but a different kind of quiet, the kind that happens when something unexpected is occurring. Elvis's voice was clear and pure, but with something else underneath, a tremor of emotion that made the simple lyrics sound like truth. He wasn't just singing about a boy and his dog. He was singing about love and loss, about poverty and dreams, about being 10 years old and already knowing that life could hurt you. Look closer at what happened during the second verse. "I remember Old Shep and I wandered about." Elvis's eyes found people in the crowd, not performing at them, but singing to them, like he was telling each person a secret. An old farmer in overalls wiped his eyes. A mother pulled her child closer. Even James Osborne stopped smirking. But here's the magic nobody talks about. Elvis forgot he was scared. Somewhere between the second verse and the third, the frightened boy disappeared, and something else emerged. Not Elvis the superstar. That was decades away. But Elvis the storyteller, Elvis the channel for emotion. Elvis the boy who could take a simple song about a dog and make 300 people feel something real. Years passed, and at last he died. Elvis's voice cracked on died, not from inexperience, but from genuine emotion. He was thinking about Jessie, his twin who never got to stand on any stage, about his grandmother, about all the things poor kids from East Tupelo lost before they knew they had them. The last note hung in the October air like smoke from the corn dog stands. And for a moment, just a moment, nobody moved. Then the applause started. Not thunderous but real, appreciative, surprised. Elvis stood on that chair, blinking in the afternoon sun, not sure what had just happened. Mississippi Slim helped him down. "That was real nice, son. Real nice." Elvis found Gladys in the crowd. She was crying but smiling too, that particular combination that mothers perfect when their children exceed even their highest hopes. The judging took forever, or seemed to. Elvis sat with Gladys on a hay bale, sharing a 5-cent Coke she'd bought with their last nickel. Around them the fair continued, barkers calling, rides spinning, livestock lowing. But Elvis heard none of it. He was replaying the performance in his head. Not the mistakes, there were several, but the feeling. The moment when 300 strangers leaned forward to hear him better. "You did good, baby," Gladys said. "Did I?" "You did something. I don't know what, but you did something." Notice what happened when they announced the winners. Third place, James McMahon and his guitar. Elvis applauded. James deserved it. Second place, Elvis Presley. Elvis's name sounded different over the loudspeaker. Not bigger, but more real somehow. Like it belonged there, coming through speakers, reaching people's ears. He walked back onto that stage. No chair needed this time because he was receiving, not performing. Mississippi Slim handed him $5, more money than Elvis had ever held, and a certificate that said second place Children's Day Contest 1945. First place went to Shirley Galloway, and Elvis applauded for her too. She was brilliant. But second meant he belonged up there, meant his voice was worth something, meant that maybe, just maybe, the dreams he hadn't even dared to dream might be possible. But wait, here's what really mattered. After the contest, an old black man who'd been working one of the food stands approached Gladys and Elvis. His name was Carlton Hayes, and he played guitar on Beale Street in Memphis. "Your boy's got something," he told Gladys. "Thank you, sir." "No, I mean he's got something. That wasn't just singing, that was feeling. You can't teach feeling." He turned to Elvis. "You keep singing, boy. But more than that, you keep feeling. World's got plenty of singers, not enough feelers." Elvis never forgot those words. The walk home was different from the walk there. Same dusty road, same October heat, same 3 miles to East Tupelo. But Elvis walked taller, not because he'd won second place was still losing, but because he'd done it. He'd stood on a stage, alone, and made strangers care about a song. "Mama, can we get a guitar?" "Baby, we can't afford a guitar." "Maybe with the $5. That's for winter shoes. You need shoes more than music." But Elvis was already hearing guitars in his head, imagining his fingers on strings instead of standing empty-handed on stages. Remember what Vernon said when they got home. Vernon was on the porch. Having not gone to the fair, someone had to stay and watch the house. He'd said, though really they couldn't afford 3 admissions. Elvis showed him the $5 and the certificate. "Second place, huh?" "Yes, sir." "Who got first?" "Shirley Galloway. She plays piano." Vernon nodded. "Rich kids always win. But second's not bad for a Presley." It was the closest to pride Elvis had ever heard in his father's voice. That night Elvis couldn't sleep. He lay on his mattress on the floor. He shared a bed with his parents, but tonight he wanted to be alone, holding the certificate up to catch the moonlight through the window. Second place. Children's Day, 1945. Proof that Elvis Aaron Presley, nobody from nowhere, had stood on a stage and been judged worthy of something. The immediate effect was subtle but profound. At school, kids looked at him differently. Not with respect exactly, but with curiosity. Elvis Presley, the shy kid who sang at the fair. Teachers mentioned it. "Elvis, I heard you performed at the fair. Would you like to sing for the class?" He wouldn't, not yet, but they asked. More importantly, Elvis looked at himself differently. The mirror showed the same skinny kid with the same second-hand clothes, but now he knew there was something inside him that could reach people. Something that could take a simple song and make it matter. Look at what happened 2 months later. January 8, 1946. Elvis's 11th birthday. Gladys had saved and scraped and done extra washing, and there it was, a guitar, not new, not fancy, just a $7.75 acoustic guitar from Tupelo hardware store. But it was his, and it had strings, and it could make music. "But Mama, I thought we couldn't afford it." "We couldn't, but you earned it. Not the $5, we needed that for food. But what you did at that fair, baby, you earned this." The guitar changed everything and nothing. Elvis still couldn't really play it, wouldn't learn properly for another year, but he carried it everywhere. To school, to church, to the grocery store. It became part of him, an extension of his arm, a shield against shyness. People would ask, "Can you play that?" And Elvis would say, "Learning." And sometimes he'd sing a little, and their faces would change the way faces had changed at the fair. But here's the detail that matters most. Every October after that, Elvis would think about the fair. Even when he was playing Vegas, even when he owned 100 guitars, even when stadiums full of people screamed his name, he'd remember standing on that wobbly chair, barefoot, terrified, singing about a dog to farmers and their families. In 1956, famous now, Elvis returned to the Mississippi-Alabama Fair. 20,000 people came to see him. He was paid $10,000, 2,000 times what he'd won in 1945. Before he sang, he told the crowd about that first time, about the chair and the $5, and being so scared he forgot his shoes. "That little boy on that chair," he said. "He didn't know what was coming. Good thing too. Might have been too scared to sing." The soft close nobody talks about. In 1971, Elvis was in Vegas, overweight, over-medicated, overshadowed by his own legend. After a particularly difficult show where his voice cracked and he forgot lyrics, he sat in his dressing room with Red West, one of the Memphis Mafia. "You know when I was best?" Elvis asked. "When?" "October 3rd, 1945. 10 years old, singing Old Shep at the fair. That was the purest I ever was. Before the money, before the fame, before the pills, before any of it. Just a boy who loved a song, singing for people who wanted to hear it." "You can still be that." Elvis laughed. Bitter. "No, Red. You can't go back to the fair. You can't climb back on that chair. You can't be 10 again believing $5 makes you rich." But he was wrong about one thing. Every time Elvis sang, through the movie years, through the comeback special, through the final tours, there were moments when that 10-year-old boy emerged. Moments when the machinery of fame fell away, and it was just Elvis and a song, and people who needed to feel something. The boy on the chair never really left. He just got buried under jumpsuits and contracts and expectations. That's the real story of Elvis's first performance. Not the beginning of a superstar, but a frightened child discovering he could transform fear into feeling, poverty into poetry, a simple song into something sacred. October 3rd, 1945. A wobbly chair, 300 people, and a boy who would become the king, but was in that moment just Elvis, barefoot, brave, and absolutely alive. The $5 was spent on winter shoes, as planned. The certificate was lost in one of the family's many moves. But the feeling of standing elevated above a crowd, of opening your mouth and having magic come out, of watching your mother cry with pride, that feeling never left. Every stage Elvis ever stood on had an invisible chair on it, and an invisible boy singing about a dog, discovering that he was somebody after all.